In the vibrant heart of Lagos, where the sun beats down with relentless enthusiasm, the Okafor family enjoyed their usual Saturday morning. Mrs. Ada Okafor watched her children play from the balcony of their modest yet cheerful apartment. Young Ade, curious and full of life, decided to explore beyond the usual playground, drawn to the shimmering, mysterious pond in the local park, known to the elders as the Serpent's Eye. As the day wore on, Ade's laughter was replaced by an eerie silence. When the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and red, Ada realized Ade hadn't returned. Panic set in, igniting a search that would reveal secrets far beyond the scope of a typical missing child scenario. The community of Ikoyi, where the Okafor family lived, was tight-knit, with neighbors who knew each other by name and shared in each other's joys and sorrows. The news of Ade's disappearance spread like wildfire, igniting a collective fear and urgency. Old Baba Tunde, who had lived in Ikoyi longer than anyone could remember, whispered tales of the pond serpent, a creature said to ensnare children with its enchanting gaze, only to pull them into depths unknown. But as the night deepened, so did the suspicion that this was no mere legend, but a mask for something far more sinister. The dawn broke with a somber mood over Ikoyi, as volunteers from the neighborhood and beyond gathered at the park. The police, led by Inspector Kola, a man known for his sharp wit and dedication, took charge. They organized teams to comb through the park, focusing on the area around the pond. The water was still, too still, as if holding its breath. Children were kept away, their parents' eyes filled with worry and silent prayers. As the search progressed, the stories Baba Tunde told the night before began to seep into the consciousness of the searchers, casting a shadow over their efforts. Despite the growing unease, the community was determined. They brought in divers, though the pond was shallow, its depths shrouded by thick vegetation. Every rustle of leaves, every ripple in the water seemed to whisper the name of Ade. Yet, as the day turned into evening, no sign of the boy was found. The community's resolve was tested, but it was during this time that young Emeka, a friend of Ade, mentioned seeing a strange man near the pond just before Ade vanished. This clue shifted the narrative from mythical to potentially criminal. As the search continued into the next day, the legend of the serpent became a focal point. Baba Tunde, now seen more as a keeper of ancient warnings rather than just an old man with tales, shared more about the serpent's lore. He spoke of how, many years ago, children would disappear near the pond, only to return changed, their eyes hollow and their spirits broken, as if they had peered into something dark and overwhelming. This tale, coupled with the lack of physical evidence of Ade, fueled speculation that perhaps there was a truth hidden within these myths. Inspector Kola, though skeptical of supernatural explanations, was intrigued by the psychological impact of such stories on the community. He began to consider if this serpent myth was being used as a cover for something far more human and evil. He decided to delve deeper into the history of the pond and the disappearances linked to it, starting with interviews of the oldest residents of Ikoyi who might remember or have heard tales from their forebears. The community of Ikoyi, now bonded by this crisis, held a vigil for Ade. Candles flickered like stars against the night, each one a beacon of hope and unity. People from all walks of life came together, sharing stories, fears, and determination. This gathering was not just about mourning or searching, but about awakening a sense of vigilance and protection over their children. Mrs. Ada Okafor, though overwhelmed by grief, found strength in the collective resolve, her voice rising above the murmurs as she spoke of Ade's love for adventure and his bright spirit. In the midst of this, Emeka came forward again, his young mind piecing together something he had seen but didn't understand at the time. He described a van near the pond, one that looked out of place with its tinted windows and the odd way it lingered. This new piece of information, coupled with the community's newfound unity, spurred Inspector Kola into action, setting up a task force to look into any suspicious vehicles or persons around the area, especially those linked to child disappearances. Inspector Ko's investigation led him to explore not just the physical terrain, but the digital one. With the help of a tech-savvy neighbor, they began to scour the dark web, where whispers of a child trafficking ring in Lagos had surfaced. The mention of a serpent in these dark forums was not of the mythical kind but a code name for a human trafficker known for his method of luring children. This revelation shifted the narrative from local myth to a global crime network, with Ikoyi's pond serving as one of many lures. The task force, now including cyber experts, traced communications to various points in Lagos, leading to the realization that the disappearance of Ade and possibly other children was part of a larger, more disturbing puzzle. This chapter delves into the complexities of modern crime, where technology and human greed intertwine, leaving Inspector Kola and the community on a knife edge between hope and despair. With new leads, Inspector Kola decided on an undercover operation. He enlisted the help of two young officers who could pass for teenagers to infiltrate the areas where the trafficking was suspected to occur. Their mission was to gather evidence, identify the key players, and most importantly, locate any children who might still be alive. This chapter focuses on the tension and bravery required for such covert operations, the ethical dilemmas faced by the officers, and the hope that flickered anew with each piece of information they gathered. Meanwhile, the community continued their vigil, now not just for Ade but for all the children who might be in danger. They organized patrols, watched over each other's children more vigilantly, and started to educate themselves about the signs of trafficking, turning their grief and fear into action. The undercover operation bore fruit when one of the officers, now known as Toby, among the traffickers, overheard discussions about the serpent's next catch. It was clear that the term referred to the head of the operation, a man known for his charisma and cruelty. The description matched no one in the police database, suggesting he was a ghost in the legal system, perhaps operating from the shadows for years. This chapter explores the psychological profile of such a criminal mastermind, the methods used to ensnare children, and how myths like the serpent of the pond were manipulated to serve his dark purposes. The community, now more involved than ever, started piecing together past disappearances with this new understanding, feeling both horror at the reality and relief for finally having a direction. With the identity and operation of the serpent now clearer, a rescue plan was formulated. It involved not just police but community members, each playing a role from lookout to direct support in the rescue. This chapter details the meticulous planning, the emotional roller coaster of hope and fear, and the strategic use of the community's knowledge of the area. Mrs. Okafor, driven by maternal instinct, insisted on being part of the operation, her strength infectious, turning her into a symbol of resilience. The plan was risky, with the lives of children, including potentially Ade, hanging in the balance, but the resolve was firm: bring them home or ensure justice. The night was tense, with every sound amplified by the anticipation of confrontation. The raid on the suspected trafficking hub in an old warehouse near the port of Lagos was executed with precision. This chapter captures the chaos of the raid, the initial resistance from the traffickers, and the heart-stopping moments as children were found, some silent, others crying out in relief. Ade was not among the first children found, deepening the despair, but the operation yielded a trove of evidence, including digital devices that could lead to the broader network. This chapter ends on a cliffhanger, with the fate of Ade still uncertain. The immediate aftermath of the raid was a mix of celebration and sorrow. While several children were rescued, the absence of Ade left a void in the hearts of the Okafors and the community. This chapter delves into the emotional toll on everyone involved, the processing of trauma among the children rescued, and the communities coming to terms with the darkness that had lurked so close. However, the raid also brought unexpected leads. Among the traffickers arrested was one who seemed to know more about Ade's whereabouts, hinting at another location. This information reignited hope, but also underscored the vastness and horror of the trafficking network. Following the new lead, the investigation expanded beyond Ikoyi, reaching into the underbelly of Lagos. This chapter follows Inspector Kola and his team as they navigate through the city's seedy districts, piecing together the network's operations. Each step forward reveals more about the sophistication of the trafficking ring, from their use of technology to their connections with corrupt officials. The community, now more than ever, rallies around the Okafors, offering support and resources, showcasing the resilience and unity of the people of Lagos. This chapter also explores the psychological profile of the rescued children, their slow path to healing, and the community's efforts to ensure no child would ever be taken again. The investigation leads to the discovery of what can only be described as the Serpent's Lair, a hidden compound on the outskirts of Lagos where high-profile clients meet their darkest desires. This chapter is tense, filled with the dread of what might be found and the hope of finally rescuing Ade. The operation to infiltrate this compound is fraught with danger, highlighting the bravery of the law enforcement and the community members who joined in. Inside, they find not just Ade but several other children, all in various states of shock or adaptation to their horrific circumstances. The rescue is bittersweet, with the joy of reuniting families tempered by the realization of how deep the network's roots go. The reunion of Ade with his family is a moment of profound emotion, captured in this chapter's narrative. However, the joy is shadowed by the stories Ade and the other children tell, stories of manipulation, fear, and resilience. This chapter also reveals the extent of the trafficking operation, with international links that would require cooperation beyond Lagos, even beyond Nigeria. The community holds a celebration for the rescued children, but also a somber meeting to discuss how to prevent such horrors in the future. It's a moment of community transformation, from passive to proactive in child safety. With the traffickers in custody, the trial begins, but it's not straightforward. This chapter delves into the complexities of prosecuting such cases, with witnesses scared or silenced, evidence potentially tampered with, and the influence of those involved in the network attempting to sway justice. Inspector Kola and his team work tirelessly to ensure the truth comes to light, facing threats and corruption. The community watches, learning about the legal system's challenges in dealing with such deep-seated crime. During the trial, the serpent is finally unmasked, revealing a face no one expected, a well-respected businessman with deep ties in politics and business. This revelation sends shockwaves through Lagos, forcing a re-evaluation of trust and integrity among the community and officials. This chapter explores the impact of this revelation on public perception, the media frenzy, and the personal devastation felt by those who had known or admired the accused. It's a chapter of introspection, anger, and a call for systemic change. As the legal proceedings continue, this chapter focuses on the healing process. Ade and the other children undergo therapy, supported by the community and specialized NGOs. The narrative here is about recovery, not just physical but emotional and psychological, highlighting the resilience of children and the role of community in healing. Mrs. Okafor, now a symbol of hope and action, starts a foundation aimed at child safety and awareness, turning her ordeal into a movement. With the main perpetrator behind bars, efforts turn to dismantling the entire network. This chapter follows the global cooperation to trace and arrest other members, with a focus on how international law enforcement agencies work together. It's a testament to the power of collaboration, but also reveals the ongoing battle against human trafficking. The community, now more vigilant, plays a role in this by providing tips and supporting law enforcement, showcasing a new era of community policing. Ade and his friends slowly return to a semblance of normal life, though forever changed. This chapter looks at their reintegration into school, play, and family life, emphasizing the small victories and the ongoing challenges of PTSD and societal reintegration. It's here that the story begins to weave themes of forgiveness, understanding, and the long road to reclaiming innocence, or at least peace. The trial concludes, with the main traffickers receiving severe sentences. However, this chapter delves into the legacy of the serpent, exploring how such individuals leave a mark on society, the myths they create, and the fear they instill. The community reflects on how stories like the Serpent of the Pond can be both a warning and a tool for evil, leading to discussions on education, myth, and truth in community lore. With the immediate threat gone, Ikoyi begins to heal and rebuild. This chapter is about renewal with community projects, new safety measures, and a focus on education about safety. The pond, once a place of fear, becomes a symbol of transformation, with plans to turn it into a community space for education and reflection. The community establishes a neighborhood watch, focusing not just on physical safety, but on vigilance against signs of trafficking or abuse. This chapter explores how such initiatives work, the training involved, and the stories of those who join, from former victims to concerned citizens. Ade and other children start speaking out, using their experiences to educate others. This chapter is filled with hope as these young voices lead campaigns, write, and speak at events, turning their trauma into advocacy. It's about empowerment and the power of youth. Even with the main network dismantled, the shadow of the serpent lingers, suggesting that vigilance must never wane. This chapter discusses ongoing investigations, the uncovering of smaller rings, and the continuous education of the public about the signs of trafficking. Mrs. Okafor's foundation grows, becoming a beacon for child safety across Nigeria. This chapter details the foundation's work, from education programs to international partnerships, showing how one family's tragedy can lead to widespread change. The community revisits the legends of the serpent, now with a new understanding. This chapter is philosophical, examining how myths can be both protective and destructive, and how communities can use their cultural narratives to teach rather than scare. Years later, the chapter revisits Ade and his family, showing their progress, the challenges they still face, and how they've integrated the lessons learned into their lives. It's a chapter about the long-term effects of trauma and recovery. This chapter broadens the scope, showing how the events in Ikoyi have resonated globally, with similar stories from around the world, highlighting the universal fight against child trafficking. A new generation of children in Ikoyi grows up with stories of Ade and the serpent, but these stories are now of bravery, community action, and vigilance. This chapter focuses on how these children learn from the past, preparing them for a safer future. A final look at the ongoing efforts against human trafficking. This chapter discusses how the story of the serpent has become a cautionary tale worldwide, leading to better laws, education, and international cooperation. The final chapter reflects on the transformation of Ikoyi, from a place touched by darkness to one of light and hope. It's a narrative of how one incident can change a community, how myths can be reshaped, and how love and community can prevail over the darkest of human behaviors. The story ends with a community event, celebrating not just the survival but the thriving of its people, with Ade, now a young adult, speaking on the importance of remembering the past while looking forward to the future.